RGS Worcester, a case study of digital culture, with me, John Jones, Director of Innovation at the RGS Worcester family of schools.
And myself, Matt Warne, Head of Computing and Digital Technology at RGS The Grange.
The RGS Worcester family of schools have origins going right back to the 7th century. RGS Worcester holds claim to be the 6th oldest school on the planet, originally founded by Bishop Bozel in 685 AD. From its early origins in the heart of the city of Worcester, our school is now spread across 4 sites, including RGS Worcester itself, RGS The Grange, RGS Dodderhill, and RGS Springfield, and each school enjoys a wonderful combination of unique distinction and shared heritage.
And I apologise in advance to any Latin speakers out there for my terrible pronunciation, but I can tell you the RGS Worcester School motto is
Respice e prospice.
and that stands for cherishing the past whilst looking to the future. Although we are certainly incredibly proud of our ancient traditions, we like to think that classroom practice has moved on somewhat from the schemes of work implemented in the 7th century.
And never before was that more apparent than when in 2014 we launched our digital learning programme. This meant that all pupils from Year 5 to Year 13 across all of our schools were to bring iPads into class, whilst those from reception to Year 4 were supplied with a school-owned device. Furthermore, all our teachers were kitted out with an iPad and a MacBook. Having 2 devices for teachers is, however, a luxury and not something that a lot of schools are able to facilitate. At your school, it'll be worth conducting some research here to choose the best pathway. When our devices arrived, we didn't just hand them out in the hope they would somehow work. Indeed, that is pretty much the worst thing you can do when adopting tech, and I'm a little concerned that the COVID-enforced move by many schools to cater for remote learning involves examples where long-term digital strategy has not been thorough enough. Multiple devices have been purchased and distributed with little hope of having genuine shift in school culture. And now we are back at school. I'm already hearing stories of the devices simply gathering dust in cupboards.
Indeed, for digital technology to be fully embedded within our school culture, it takes a lot more than just procurement. And what exactly is school culture? Well, one common theme about it that academics and school leaders will almost unanimously agree upon is that culture is notoriously hard to define. The definition from Rossman, Corbett and Firestone summarises it best for me. Indeed, when applied to adopting iPads, the end goal should be the normalisation of digital technology as an everyday standard practice, when teachers and pupils don't use the devices because they have to, but because it makes sense to do so. The advantages should be obvious.
Furthermore, most school leaders, teachers and academics would also agree that despite being hard to define, culture is one of the most significant concepts within education. The quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," attributed to educator and management consultant Peter Drucker, summarises this nicely. To be clear, he didn't mean that strategy was unimportant, rather that a powerful and empowering culture was a surer route to organisational success. Indeed, having myself worked in a variety of different schools, I can confirm how widely school cultures can vary. From leadership styles to priorities to behavioural expectations, the differences from school to school are often truly remarkable and can mean entirely different experiences for pupils, parents and staff.
Another common theme upon which there is consensus is that school culture is inherently difficult to change. This, of course, is particularly significant when adopting iPads in schools. They represent real change to the way things are done, and therefore a real challenge to established cultures.
Take, for example, Blockbuster Video, one of the original video rental stores. It was on almost every high street in the UK until the early 21st century. Queues of people would wait outside waiting to grab the latest VHS release along with a stupidly large bag of Maltesers. However, when the practice of watching home videos shifted, Blockbuster failed to change their business model. They refused to take on the challenge of culture change and ultimately failed because of it.
On the other hand, businesses that have been both willing and able to change those norms and practices have adapted and thrived. Consider, for example, Jam. Since 2002, they've built and adapted their business model. Jam's product portfolio now includes identity and authentication management, endpoint security, and education-specific mobile device management. The culture of continual growth, development, and outstanding customer service has meant that they are now the go-to choice for Apple ecosystems, and certainly the RGS Worcester family of schools.
Therefore, despite being hard to change and difficult to define, the good news is that, as Jamf suggests, culture can be learned. Indeed, in the UK, according to Forbes, more than 70% of British firms claim to have changed their business model in response to the coronavirus crisis. However, only half of those firms believe these will be for the long term, whilst only a quarter anticipate some of them will be permanent. Do these changes represent temporary shift or long-term cultural change? Only time will tell. Either way, it is essential for schools to realise that toxic, negative, stagnant cultures do not have to be permanent. There are always ways to learn, which means in turn, with the correct approach, the cultural shift to technology, such as iPads and Jamf, being normalised, highly regarded by key stakeholders and used as standard practice within your organisation, can be achieved. Let's take a look at some of the key strands involved in this.
This diagram is based upon the dimensions of change, an academic approach to managing change. There are 6 columns, each containing a key component that needs to be considered, and we'll start on the left-hand column and the first one to consider.
Vision. A vision should provide inspiration and spark ideas around what can be possible. It can be used to excite staff about what they're working on, igniting their creativity and driving their desire to collaborate. Without a vision for your iPad adoption, or your Jamf adoption, or any sort of tech adoption, confusion is inevitable.
Consensus. It means broad agreement amongst leadership and amongst staff. There needs to be shared ownership and understanding behind the vision. There needs to be a consensus of approval towards the adoption and willingness to achieve the vision. If the majority of staff are not on board with your iPad adoption, it's likely they will find as many barriers as possible, and your plans could fail. To get consensus, the value of an iPad adoption needs to be made clear, as does the pathway to achieving it.
Skills. Continuous professional development is another key strand to any form of adoption of technology. It needs to be genuinely continuous, but also adaptive to change, and ideally use a variety of different approaches, such as workshops, mentoring, and coaching. Indeed, it will ultimately be teacher competency that defines the progress of reform. It is up to leadership to ensure that the CPD is ongoing, bespoke, high quality, and sufficient time is allowed. If staff are given the devices and asked to use them in class without knowing how to do it, anxiety levels will likely be through the roof.
Incentives. It's unlikely that you'll ever be able to offer teachers a cash bung for getting stuck in with the iPad adoption. However, the incentives for teacher buy-ins should be a demonstration of advantages of an iPad adoption and which it will result in. It might include reduced workload, increased efficiency, more opportunity for meaningful creative learning, and immersion in digital ecosystems that mirror the real world. Furthermore, I can honestly say I've not used a photocopier once in the 2 years at RGS Worcester. What more of an incentive could a teacher want? Without knowing the value of an iPad adoption and what difference it will have on learning, there will naturally be resistance to the planned scheme.
Resources. Without the necessary resources, any tech adoption will be doomed to fail. This doesn't just mean devices for staff and pupils, it also means holistic and future-proofed infrastructure that ensures safe and secure access to the internet, dynamic mobile device management systems such as Jamf, and indeed, time. It means considering budgetary plans, making them affordable, manageable and sustainable. It is the responsibility of leadership to make sure these resources are provided. Without this, staff and pupils will be left frustrated and demotivated.
Action plan. This is the strategy that Peter Drucker referred to. And note, it's one of the elements required to successfully change culture. With any successful journey, there needs to be an ambitious but achievable plan with specific objectives that can be quantified. Where do you want to be in 5 years, and how will you take the steps to achieve it? Without plans for development, you will find the adoption gets caught on a treadmill and will be unlikely to progress.
At RGS Worcester, having ensured all these strands have been carefully monitored, our digital learning programme is working, having profound effects on teaching and learning, and is now firmly embedded within our school culture.
Indeed, our vision is simple and clear: to provide an outstanding education through meaningful innovation. Furthermore, it's clearly articulated in our digital strategy.
A key strand of our CPD is Apple Teacher, which has become a fundamental part of our CPD, and the uptake demonstrates how it is the norm to have completed the qualification and a demonstration of consensus. All new staff are required to become Apple Teachers within their first year and receive a certificate and email signature as recognition. Although it is worth remembering that Apple Teacher forms just one of a rich offering of CPD opportunities available across all 4 of our schools.
We also gathered data on the importance of our digital learning programme to everyday practice across our 4 schools. This itself provided a very interesting insight. Firstly, it's incredible to see how important teachers regard the digital learning programme as part of their everyday practice. Use of their iPad and MacBook is second nature and simply an essential part of their everyday toolkit. Another very interesting piece of feedback was the fact RGS Dodderhill teachers saw slightly less importance in the digital learning programme. This came as no surprise, as Dodderhill only joined the RGS Worcester family 2 years ago, proving that permanent cultural shift is not something that can happen overnight.
Furthermore, any scrutiny of our curriculum would see countless opportunities for pupils to express their knowledge and understanding in colourful and creative ways. Indeed, the everyone can create and everyone can code curricula from Apple has proven to be of real use here. From our prep schools to our senior schools, the possibilities afforded by digital tech are embraced whenever they add meaning and engagement to learning.
Our ability to shift to remote education provided further evidence of the extent to which digital culture helps to form the fabric of our schools. Although the school doors were shut, the schools were by no means closed. And from day one of the first lockdown, all pupils received their full timetable of lessons, access to co-curricular clubs, and ensured the continuity of learning. These accolades are testament to efforts of all our pupils and staff who were able to use digital technology so successfully during a very challenging time.
Subsequently, on a walk around any of our 4 schools on any given day, you would see digital technology being used across the curriculum, across the key stages, and as a fundamental part of everyday teaching and learning. Not in every class all the time, but where digital technology adds genuine meaning to learning.
Our digital learning programme is now deeply embedded within our school culture, and the question that normally gets asked about our digital learning programme is no longer why, but what next? Our culture of innovation means that we persistently seek new and better ways to improve outcomes for staff and pupils. DLP AI, artificial intelligence, AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality. And I'd like to pose that same question to you. What next for you? What next for your colleagues? What next for your schools? Where are you on the journey of EdTech adoption? And what do you need to do next to ensure it's successful?